So let's get started. So my name's Kevin Smith. I am the product manager for Personal Finance Lab. Personal Finance Lab itself, it basically works as a stock game with embedded curriculum, and we try to make it super customizable.
Kevin, can you just wait 1 minute because I minimized something and now I'm not showing. Let me see if it's.
Sure.
Go to meeting. Go to meeting. I lost you along the way. Oh, here you are. I try to minimize the
bar thing?
Yes, and it didn't work. Go ahead. Okay. I'm good.
Okay, so basically the whole concept behind Personal Finance Lab is that stock market games tend to be a very good cementing activity for students in a few different types of classes. And so we capitalize on that, and we capitalize on the fact that it's usually a pretty exciting part of the class process because students like the class rankings and things to cement the lessons that you're already going through. So basically, I'm going to jump right into it, and I'm going to walk through it from a teacher's perspective, and I'll also explain what happens with the student along the way. So both of you should have a login by now. If you don't have it, just let me know and I'll resend it to you. But to log in, just click login at the top of the page or anywhere on the main page. And you'll be taken to either a page that looks like this, or you'll be taken straight to the class creation page. Connie, I think you'll be taken to the class creation because you've never had one before.
Right.
Basically, the way this works is when you create a class, I'll do it right here. I'll go under administration at the top here. This is where you can find all of your teacher tools. I'll click create challenge. The idea here is first you'll set up the rules for a class stock game. So, give your students a virtual portfolio. But then we're also going to add in lessons and curriculum that line up with what you're talking about specifically in class. And that way you can kind of go from both ways where you have this engaging activity that goes along with what you're doing. If you need any help while you're using How the Market Works, you can always email or call me, but there's also a live chat at the bottom of the page that goes straight to our support team. They can help you basically with any questions you have about how to use it. So the first step here in creating your class is the process of setting up the class stock game part. And it's not very complicated, and if you don't know what you would want for any of these rules, you can really just kind of stick with the defaults we have here. They're the most popular. But I'll kind of walk through a little bit about how they work anyway. The first one is setting up a class name. So when your students come in to register for the first time, they're going to need to join into your class, and so this name would be letting them know that this is your class. So basically anything in here, so long as it's not used by another class in Personal Finance Lab, you might want to include like the semester number or something in case you're using it multiple years. In the description, again, it just appears when your students are coming in for the first time to make sure they're in the right class. Estimated number of participants, this doesn't actually impact your class at all. This is just used when we do our marketing materials saying how many students use our sites each year. So I'll put 25 for now, but it doesn't matter if you have more or less actually register. Public and private. So it doesn't happen often, but occasionally a student will join into the wrong class by mistake. Basically, this happens if you have multiple hours or multiple sets of students with different classes, and then they just get the wrong link by mistake. You can kind of mitigate this by using this private link, which means that you can set a password that your students need to enter in order to join. Basically, this will appear on the registration page for your students, and they'll need to enter this in order to enter your class. Next is the portfolio rules. So, I mean, it's some fairly basic stuff that just looks at how they're going to be using the stock game. What currency are they using? How much cash you want to give them to start with? The registration dates. These are the dates when the students can come in and create their accounts. And the trading dates are the dates for the actual stock game part. So before this trading start date, they won't be able to make any trades. After this trading end date, their portfolios get frozen in time. So that means that they don't need to sell everything off. It's just going to, as soon as this date passes, when they log in the next day, their portfolio is going to be locked to what it was when the market closed on the last day. That means you can use the assignments feature of the curriculum both before and after your trading dates. This is just for the stock game itself. Time zone, you'll probably be sticking with Eastern time, but if you're working with some kind of remote thing, you can still choose something different. And then what can your students actually do? Can they short sell? Can they day trade? Can they borrow money and buy on margin? The more basic students you have, the ones that are less familiar with financial topics, the more of these you're going to turn off. The more students are familiar with them, you'll turn them back on. You can also come in after you've set up your class and you can turn these on and off as your class goes on. So for example, you can start off a class not allowing day trading, but then turn it on a few weeks into the class once you talk about what that is in class. You can also choose if you as the teacher are going to appear in the class rankings. So some teachers like to use their teacher account as kind of a benchmark for students to trade against, and it kind of makes it a little bit more fun for the students, I think. Others don't want to appear in the rankings at all, so you can choose that. Either way, you can come in and trade. It just says whether or not you're going to be in the rankings page. Trading notes. So every time a student goes to make a trade, they also have the opportunity to write a sentence or two about their rationale behind this trade. In the classroom setting, we find this is very important because you can use this as an opportunity to say students need to write notes about how the trade they're making today relates back to something they were talking about in class, or just make sure that they're not trading at random. They actually have some thought behind what they're doing. So turning this as required means they have to write something before they can trade. If you turn this to no, then it's just kind of optional. We do recommend all classes have this as required. Minimum prices. So basically you can make sure your students can't trade penny stocks. We generally recommend $5 for each of these. Public portfolios. With a public portfolio, this would let your students see each other's trades. So if you're doing a more competitive spirit, you would turn this off. That way your students are kind of focusing on what they're doing alone. If you really want it to be just a pure learning exercise, the students can see each other's trades, what each other are doing, and see why the person in first place is in first place. With either case, you as the teacher can see everything, of course. This just says, can your students see each other's stuff? Class forums. We also have the opportunity where students can post messages to each other, have some discussion about what kind of investments they're doing or their assignment progress and things like that. You can turn that on or off for your class too. Again, we recommend that keeping that on. Because Personal Finance Lab is just a website, students can access this from home, and this is a good way for students to kind of engage with each other even if they're not necessarily in the classroom working on this at the time. Next, you'll choose what can your students trade. So equities is stocks and ETFs, mutual funds, of course, and bonds. These are the most common in just about every class. Depending on what kind of students you're working with, you might turn on some of these other security types too. If you do choose futures, you're going to see this pop up here. Basically, the CME group mandates that anyone using our futures data needs to verify that they are a school. So basically, they want permission to be able to contact you if needed. So far, we've never had a teacher actually been contacted, but they're just trying to make sure that everyone who says that they're a school is a school. Otherwise, yeah, you can turn these on and off as your class goes on. You can leave them as they are right here, and you can see for each of these security types, you choose the commission structure. Is it per trade or per share? How much commission they're charged for each trade, and you have these two rules here. The first one is called the position limit. Position limit means students can only invest this percentage of their portfolio in any one security. So this 25% position limit says I can only invest a quarter of my portfolio in any single stock. So like Amazon stock or Apple stock. I would need to have at least 4 stocks to use up all my cash. The diversification rule applies to this security type as a whole. So for example, if I set this to 50%, that's saying that I can only put 50% of my investments in equities. I have to use the rest somewhere else. So I have to put at least something in mutual funds or bonds. So those take a little bit more getting used to, but once you get the hang of it, it's pretty easy to use. Basically, the whole idea here is to make it so your students don't put all their eggs in one basket. They get a little bit of experience experimenting with a couple different things while they're using the game. Down here, we have a list of exchanges. So there's actually quite a lot of international exchanges available on the platform. So if you're talking about international business at all, there is some here, especially if you have any international students in your class, you might want to allow the exchange that they are actually involved with. The only thing to keep in mind with this is that While our U.S. exchanges all use real-time data in the back end, the international exchanges often have a 15-minute delay. So if you're giving out some sort of class prize, you might want to turn off day trading, just because you might have some students who would be interested in kind of trying to cheat the system. I've only seen that, I think, in 4 years, 2 or 3 times out of the tens of thousands of classes we work with. But it's just something to be aware of if you're trying to give it a prize. That's most of the rules that you would use on a day-to-day basis. There are a couple more advanced rules you can play around with. So interest earned on cash. So if your students have cash sitting in their account, we can pay them out some interest on that. You can also set this to be a negative number. So if you want to say students need to start investing right away, they can't just sit on the sidelines in cash. You can give them negative interest on their cash to make sure they start investing it more quickly. Interest charged on loan, you can charge an interest rate if you do allow the margin trading. This would control how much interest they're being charged on those loans. You can put a cap on how many trades your students can place. So at the college level, we have a few classes that will actually set up 2 separate portfolios for their students. One will be what's called the active trading, where students can trade up to 300 times, and one's a passive, where they can only trade 20 times. Basically to compare and contrast different types of trading strategies. We don't see that as often at the high school level for obvious reasons. Students aren't necessarily familiar enough to distinguish the 2 strategies right away, but you do have the ability to set that cap either way. And you can also do things like Sharpe ratio and alpha beta rankings, some risk adjusted returns. Again, that's really for more advanced classes. The rest of these is customizing the margin, how your students can borrow money, and I would say that only 2 or 3 classes a year change these at all. If you are interested in changing them, I can go through them in more detail at a later time. But either way, once these rules are pretty much the way you want them to look, and again, if you're not sure, you can leave it the default and it's going to be fine. Just click Create, and that's all there is to it to set up your first class. To get your students registered, you would give them this link here, and you will get an email confirmation as soon as you create your class too, basically with this link and some of the other stuff for it. When your students go to this link, it basically loads in your class name. Because I did set that private class, here's the password it is, and then students need to pick their username, password, and first name, last name. We do ask an email address, and this is only used for password resets, and if you have any students that are under 16, they're not even able to put in their email address. So it's not required, it's not even necessarily recommended, but it's there for things just like account management. You'll find that if you try to click this link right now, it's not going to do anything, and that's because it's a registration link. It only works if you're logged out of your account. So if you want to test this to make sure things are the way they should be, you'll log out of your account first and then try the link. So does anybody have any questions on the basics of the first bit of the class creation?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
Yeah, no, this seems pretty simple. I don't remember, Kevin, me seeing this before. I think we just kind of talked and you told us about it. I don't remember seeing all of this, but
that's possible.
Okay.
But yeah, this part's pretty straightforward. Like I mentioned briefly with the college students often having 2 portfolios, your students actually are able to have multiple classes in the same account. So if they're in one class and they come to another class, they can use the same account and just add a portfolio to it. If they do that, when they log in, they'd be able to flip between them at any time using the drop down on any page. And the reason I'm mentioning that is because right now we're actually just in the process of launching our national challenge, where any students you have using the site can also join the national challenge, build a portfolio in that, where they're competing for $500 in prizes. And the teacher of the winning student also gets a trophy to kind of show off to everybody else. So once your class is set up, the next step is going to be setting up a class assignment. So to do your assignments is where you actually have the curriculum. It's the learning portion. So again, under administration at the top of the page, there's assignments down here. Now, the way the assignments work is it's a list of tasks that you're going to give your students that they need to complete in order to move forward. So the way it works here is just like when you created your class at first, you're going to give your assignment a name. And you're going to choose the start date and the due date for this assignment. You can actually go down, you can drill down pretty deep. You can even set a specific hour and minute time for when you want this assignment to be starting and ending. And the idea behind these assignments is that there's over 300 activities in here that line up with various standards and different class types, and you're going to grab the ones in here that match with what you're doing in class each week. So once you've used this personal finance lab before, we make it easy. You can copy your old assignments from a different class, but for the first time we'll go through one by one. This first section here called Investing Fundamentals, this is 10 items that we recommend that every single class include for their first assignment. This is stuff that basically walks through what your students need to know in order to use Personal Finance Lab. So the concept of what is a stock, the concept of what a diversified portfolio is, and some tutorial videos that actually walk them through the different pages on the website, how do they make their first trade, and managing their order types. So I recommend checking all 10 of these, and this is probably going to take students about an hour to complete total. Usually a little bit less, but an hour is enough time to make sure everybody's finished it.
So you say an hour to complete all those tasks?
Yeah, all these tasks. So like this order types video, this is all they have to do is watch this video, and the video is only about 2 or 3 minutes long. So that, for example, is a pretty short one. These articles, all of the articles on the site are between 1,000 and 2,000 words. They're not very long. We try to include video. We try to include good imagery, videos, and infographics to try to make sure if we're hitting a lot of different learning styles. And it always ends with a pop quiz. So students need to take this pop quiz. They're between 3 and 5 questions covering what was covered in the article itself. So altogether, reading the article, taking the quiz and everything else, it usually takes between 10 and 15 minutes each for most students. Some students are a little faster and some are a little slower, and some of these articles are a little longer and some are a little shorter. So like the Why Invest in Stocks article actually is one of our shorter ones, where it's more infographic heavy and less text heavy, where it's pretty short, and then it just ends with a 3-question quiz. So this last column here, allow retries, this is another checkbox you can tick on or off. And the idea here is that when your students take this quiz, you're deciding whether or not they're going to save their first attempt to your gradebook, or if they're allowed to retake it for a higher score. Basically, if you allow retries, they can retry it as many times as they want. If you don't allow retries, it's just going to save their first attempt.
Where is that? I think I don't see that in my screen. Where do you put try or retry?
This on the far right over, it's the far right column here.
Right, far column. On the side?
Yeah. You have to make sure you're on the create page though.
On the create assignment.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I mean, this is a table, and it's the last column in that table.
Okay. Okay.
The next set of 15 items, this is again more stuff that students are probably going to want to know while they're using the site. So I mean, what is a mutual fund? What is a bond? How do they do the investment research on the website? What is the Dow Jones Industrial Average? Again, this is going to take around an hour. There's more videos in this one. The videos are usually the fastest ones to go. And this is usually what we have as the second week's assignment. Beyond these first two, it starts breaking down kind of by grade level and by subject that you're teaching. So these next 5 items here, elementary and middle school stuff, it covers some of the same stuff as above, but we kind of dumb it down where it's really just a short video instead of a longer article. And then personal finance stuff. So personal finance is our biggest section of activities. And you can see here there's about 70 items in total, from using credit, starting a business, understanding a credit report, understanding how to calculate sales tax, filing taxes, different types of insurance. There's a lot of different stuff available here. And the whole idea is each week you're going to want to tick off a couple of these that line up what you're talking about in class, and then that'll be the assignment for students that week or that day, or however you'd like to structure it. We found most teachers will go by week, but some will actually go pretty granular and say things need to be done by a specific end of class. Towards the end of the personal finance stuff, you can also see some that are labeled as activities. For these activities, instead of it just being a article or a video, it's actually more of an interactive, involved exercise. So for example, this Saving to be a Millionaire calculator, you can see we do it by giving students this tool where they can use these sliders and these settings in order to see how long it's going to take them to save $1 million. And so the quiz associated with this gives them different scenarios that they need to use this calculator in order to solve those scenarios. So those have for building a home budget, understanding credit card payments, buy versus lease, and a few others as well.
Question. How will I know if the students have completed the assignment and the grade? Where would I get that information?
Once your assignment has been created, I'll show you that in a minute, but it would be here in the progress report and the grade book. So the progress report only shows did they do it, and the grade book shows what grade they got on it.
Okay.
And the reason we separate it is because not everything has a grade. So for example, they're not going to have any grade if they watched a video, they just did it or they didn't. But all the quizzes have grades associated with them. The next section, career readiness. So career readiness is some basic stuff about finding a job, preparing a resume, and things like that. Actually, at the very top of the page, if you look up here, we have what's called the Career Center, and there's actually a lot of really good stuff in here, and we recommend all students go through this at some point. One of the most important ones from my perspective is there's actually a real job and internship search tool. Students can use this to actually see real listings for jobs and internships in their area. Basically, we do have a couple students who've gotten internships through this, but the biggest use of it is when a student needs to build a career plan. They can search for their dream job, find a real posting for what their dream job asks, and they can start working backwards. How do I get the minimum requirements for that? How do I get the minimum requirements for the jobs that require that kind of thing? So instead of it just being kind of a dummy practice job posting that we've put up, we actually give them access to the real thing. And there's hundreds of thousands of jobs and internships available in here. We pull them from a few different sources. Economics, again, economics, there's about 30 or 40 tasks in here covering a wide range of high school economics. You can see the third column here called standards. We do align these all to state and national standards, and the standards column here is specifying if it lines up with any specific national standards. So for economics, we follow the National Council on Economic Education. For personal finance, we use the Jumpstart standards. For our business topics, we follow the NBEA standards. But we also have a separate page I can show you later that will go in more detail per state. In the business topics here, accounting, management, and marketing is what we focus on, and there's about 50 or 60 items in total in here covering all of those ranges. So there's some classes that use personal finance stuff extensively that we don't have broken out as its own topic, like finance and banking, and those will usually grab a few topics from personal finance, a few from economics, a few from accounting as they line up with that class. So it takes longer to scroll through the list, but you can still customize it to exactly the way that's going to work best for your class. This bottom section here called Investing 101, this one's a little bit different. Instead of it being one article with one quiz, Investing 101 is actually kind of a coherent, it's actually structured a little bit like a textbook, where you'll assign your students a chapter at a time. And each chapters usually have about 10 lessons each. Each of these lessons is shorter than any of the individual articles that we have, so they're pretty easy to digest. The whole chapter usually takes 2 or 3 hours. And then the chapter itself ends with the chapter review exam. So the chapter review exam actually it's a 10-question quiz for each chapter, covering everything that came in the chapter before it. So this one works best usually as kind of an extra bonus assignment, so you can have an extra assignment at the end where your students can go through this if they choose. or we do have some students or some teachers who would include this as part of the class curriculum as well as just kind of extra homework. Next is trading. So trading, you can actually mandate your students need to make certain types of trades in their portfolio. So this week you need to come in, you need to place at least 5 different trades. Follow your stocks and adjust your portfolio according to market conditions, that kind of thing. You can also require them to use different types of order types in order to make sure they understand how they work, market orders and limit orders, that kind of thing. International investing, if you're turning on some of those international markets, you can mandate the students trade on them at least once or twice to make sure they are looking at what's going on in the rest of the world. If you're using some of those more advanced security types, you can also add the tutorial articles and videos here, and you can also require them to make certain types of trades for options and futures and things. This bottom section, mathematics, this is at the bottom just because we just added it and we haven't moved it around yet. But the idea here is that most of these are using spreadsheets and using either Excel or Google Sheets to do different types of graphing and calculating exercises. So using their portfolio data in order to understand how to use a spreadsheet to format data or calculate their daily returns or calculating their profit and loss from trades or building different types of graphs. So all of these usually include a text and images guide and a video guide, and the video guide walks through both using Microsoft Excel and Google Sheets. So it's good regardless of which platform your school is using. And this last one here called assessment. So the assessment is a little bit different. The assessment is going to look at everything else that you've asked your students to do in this class. So how many articles did you ask them to read? How many videos did they look at? And anything that had a quiz on it, it's going to grab 2 questions from those quizzes and give your students kind of a final quiz that covered everything else that you asked them to do. So a lot of time teachers will have their students go through all these topics, and they can retry these quizzes if they want to, but then at the assessment at the end, that's what's actually going to be for a grade, and they won't allow retries. So basically, you can't turn on the assessment unless you have a few items that have a quiz, otherwise we don't really know what we're basing it on. So once you check a couple off, that will become ungrade. So either way, once you have the assignment set up the way you like it, just like the other class rules, you just click Create, and that's really all you need. So this class is now ready to go. Students can come in, they'll have plenty to do right away. Like I said, for the reports for your assignments, you have the progress report here. Let me refresh this page. You'll have the progress report here first, which is going to list all of your students, the last time they logged in and how far they've come on this assignment. This details button is going to show you which individual tasks they've finished and which they haven't. And the gradebooks one is going to show you the grade they got on all the quizzes. If you need to change your assignment later, there's also an edit button where you can add or remove stuff from it. You can change the dates and that kind of thing. So do you have any questions on the assignments part?
I think I may, as I use it more, but not right at this point.
Sure.
Right.
So
Right.
yeah, that's usually the case. It seems to make a lot of sense, and then when you actually go into it, you'll probably have a couple more questions for me.
Can you show me again on how you get to the lessons?
It's under
Please.
Administration at the top of the page here,
Right.
and you go to
Yeah.
Assignments.
Assignments?
Yeah.
And then all the assignments show up, or how do you get all the, for example, if I'm going to do banking, how would I get to banking?
You go to Create Assignment, and yeah, everything
Right.
shows up. So you just kind
everything
of
shows
scroll
up?
through what you'd
So
like to see. And you can see
So
actually,
it doesn't
no, go ahead.
it doesn't break it down by topic then, is that correct?
Well, it does, but the topics we have it by are like personal finance, economics, and our business stuff. So we don't have one specific to banking, so you might need to grab some stuff from a few different ones to cover what you're talking about in class.
Okay.
Like at the national level, there just aren't a specific set of banking standards that we've been following to give it a specific group.
So if you want to look for a specific topic, you really don't have that option. unless you scroll through them.
Yeah, basically. I mean, I would
Okay.
also
All right.
recommend, because there's so many, you can press Control F to search. So you can do banking, and this is going to list anything that has bank in it.
Uh-huh.
Or you'd
Oh,
more specific, you'd pick whatever you're specifically talking about each week and search for those topics.
okay.
You'll notice that since I came back to this page and went to create a new assignment, a lot of this stuff is highlighted red. That's because I included this already in an assignment for this class. So that's kind of a warning to you that you've already asked your students to do this one, so you might not need to do it again.
Okay.
So when your students log in for the first time, this is what they're going to see. This is called the dashboard. Right here in the center, these are popular stocks to give them some trading ideas on how to get started. On the right side of the page here is the assignment itself. So this is the stuff that my teachers asked me to do. I get a progress bar showing how far I've come, and I've got a countdown showing how much time I have left to finish it. It looks like the stock market is just about to close, so let me actually walk through the process of making a trade just so you can see that. Otherwise, if students come in and try to make a trade when the markets are closed, it'll let them place the order, but the order will stay pending until the market opens the next day. So it follows the real market hours. So to make a trade, they go to the Make a Trade menu, and they enter the ticker symbol. If they don't know the ticker symbol, they can also start typing the company name, and we'll show them a list of stocks that match. Once they enter the symbol, they'll have a logo showing, so they know they have the right company. They'll have this chart here showing the stock's price for today. It's going to be a red chart if the stock is losing money today. It's going to be a green chart if the stock is making money today. They'll also have a short little quote here showing the bid-ask prices, the volume, etc. And they'll enter the quantity of shares that they want to buy. So I want to buy 50 shares. That'll automatically give me how much this is probably going to cost me. I can also use market orders, limit orders, stop orders, trailing stop orders. There's some configuration available here, and that's one of the reasons why we recommend having those tutorial videos right at the beginning so they understand what those are. Preview my order. This kind of updates it to include my commission cost, and if I'm trading in an international market, it will include my forex rate, my exchange rates, and then this is where I would also enter my trade, or my trading note. I click confirm, and that's all there is to it. So at the bottom of the page here, you can see we have popular stocks on this exchange. This is the 12 most popular stocks on each of the exchanges. So if your students switch between different exchanges, it's going to give them a different list of stocks depending on what's popular. So if I go back to my dashboard now as a student, you can see I have this Sprint stock actually just appeared in my portfolio right away. The restriction here is that the price paid and the market value both say delayed right now. That's because we use real-time prices in order to execute all of the US trades to keep things realistic, to make sure students can't cheat. But because of certain rules with the exchanges, we can only show prices with a 15-minute delay. So for the first 15 minutes, these are just going to say delayed, and then the real prices will show up. You can also see a lot of other information here now that I have something in my portfolio. So clicking one-day chart switches my view to show a bunch of charts. So this is how this stock has performed today. And again, this one's red because I'm losing money on it now. So I've already lost money on this trade. A 30-day chart will show the stock's performance for the last month, and the year chart will be for the last year. The whole idea behind this is that we want to make it easy for students to get a one-glance view on how their portfolio has been doing, and this is kind of one of the best ways to do it. If they go back on the standard view, there's also this plus button. This will give a little bit more information about the stock, the company, the industry it's considered to be in, 52-week highs and lows, earnings per share, dividends, things like that. Down here, it's going to show my total market value for each security, how much money I've been making or losing on my current holdings. At the top of the page here, it shows my portfolio value, how much cash I have available, how much buying power I have, things like that, and my current ranking, which is something very important for most students. These up here is just a list of some benchmark indices for the day. So what's the S&P 500 doing, what's crude oil doing, what's gold doing today, that kind of thing. You can see since I made a trade, it actually ticked up my completion. So I've actually completed something so far in my portfolio. It's up 1%. So I haven't come far, but I've come somewhere. And they also have a pie chart available. So this pie chart is going to show them how the students have broken down their portfolio. I am 99.7% still in cash. I've only invested in technology, and I've only invested in large cap stocks. And they can even have a watch list where if they want to look at a stock and pay attention to it without necessarily putting it in their portfolio. They also have this export button. So this export button will let your students take any data they see on the site that has to do with their portfolio, and they can export it either as a spreadsheet, a CSV file they can use anywhere, or they can download it straight to Google Drive if your school uses Google Classroom. Some of the other pages available, if your students have been here for more than a day or so, let me choose when it's still open. They'll also have a portfolio performance chart that kind of maps how their portfolio has been going against the S&P 500 or the Dow Jones or any of these other indices. This will only take values at the end of the day, which means that your chart isn't going to show up at least until day 2 of the trading period. Students can also see their historical portfolio values over time and export that data as well. Some of the other tools that your students have available. Let me go back to my class. Under the dashboard, they can also access the class forum. Remember, we did turn that on. So there's no post now, so I can start a conversation. I have a question about trading. If I post a question, it's going to appear in here. You as the teacher can delete any messages at any time, so you have the ability to moderate this. We haven't ever had a problem so far with this being an issue in any classes, but it's only been in place for about a semester. And then when your students go back to their dashboard, they're actually going to see under their assignment, now the forums is popping up, letting them know that somebody's made a post that they might want to look at. They can also change their password from here. So, I mean, that's something that most students hopefully don't need to do, but it always comes up a few times a semester. Make a trade. Each of the different security types has its own trading pit. There's also a symbol lookup page if students want to look up a stock symbol without actually going to the trading page. My portfolio has everything they need to know about their portfolio, as it says. So, open positions is what I'm holding now. It's basically the same thing as the dashboard. Closed positions, I just lost the opportunity to trade that, so let me switch to a different account here. So if I go to my closed positions page, this is going to be an estimate of the profit and loss I've made on each of the trades I've made so far in the class. So if I bought something and then later sold it, how much money did I make or lose? Rankings page is one of the most popular pages on the site. So this one tells me where I'm standing in relation to everybody else in the class. And there's a kind of a chart here showing the relative performance of each of the portfolios. Students can see their overall ranking, how they're doing this week, how they're doing this month. If you did turn on that Sharp ratio or the alpha beta rankings, they're available here as well. The transaction history page is basically a list of the transactions your students have made. If they've kept those trade notes, they can also find that here. The order history page is like the transaction history, but if they've placed an order that hasn't filled yet, they can edit it or cancel it here. So for example, if they tried to buy a stock after the market closed, they can change that order. Or if they're using limit orders, they can find them here. Or if they're trying to trade mutual funds, they can find them here until about 6 p.m. when mutual fund orders go through. The account balances page, this one is the least popular page on the site, but students need to come here at least once this semester. This gives them information like how much commissions have they paid in total, how many dividends have they received on their account, what are my trading rules for my class are all laid out here. Their trading notes lists their trading notes that they made. And the assignments is basically a bigger view of the assignments page where students can see the grade they got on the quizzes, what have they completed, what they have not completed, things like that. I'm going to skip quotes. I'll come back to that later. Learning Center. So even if you don't explicitly assign something for your student to read, they can still find it here. So the Learning Center, we try to make it so there's something new for students to see every day they come back. So featured article talking about one of the more popular articles on the site, some business topics, some personal finance topics, some economics topics, words of the day, everything like that. And if I refresh the page, you can see every time I come back here, it's going to give me a whole new set of different things to see. The whole idea is, make it as fresh as possible every time a student comes to the site so they learn something new. Tutorial videos, it's the same idea. Even if you don't assign the tutorial videos, or if you assign them but a student wants to see them again, they can find them here. And students can only see the tutorial videos for the security types that you actually allowed. So if you don't allow futures trading in this on your class, they can't see the futures trading tutorial video, so they won't get confused by it. The quotes tool, I will get to that now.
Kevin.
Sure.
Kevin, I'm so sorry. I have a meeting at 4 o'clock. But I thank you. I'm gonna get a grip on this, and if I need your help, I'll give you a call. Okay?
Okay. I am also recording this, and I'll share a link to the recording later. So if you want to see the last part, you're free to do that.
All right. Thank you so much.
Sounds good. So the research tools are the quotes page. And there is a lot available in here. So this first page here is called the detailed quote. So if I look at GE, up here I get the last price, bid, ask. Down here I get an interactive chart where I can look 5-day, 3-month, down to 5-year range of how this stock's been doing. Last prices, earnings per share, market cap, everything else in here. News stories that mention this stock. So this is a good place for students to look on why this stock has been going up and down. And students can find more information on the left side of the page here. So charts. I can get a chart of this stock over the last several months. I can go any range I want to. I can add other stock symbols in here to get a comparison of how one's doing compared to the other. I can change the chart types, and we're actually adding a bunch more stuff on here soon with like technical indicators. Option chain, so if for some reason your students are working with options, they can get option quotes here. Company news, this is similar to what we had on the other page where it's showing news stories that mention this stock. Key ratios, this is more important for the finance and banking classes. Income statement ratios coming off of there. Management efficacy ratios, the asset turnover ratios, price to sales, price to book, dividends they pay out, the share performance. Again, a lot of stuff in here for a finance class. So last fiscal year-end date, last fiscal earnings per share, price changes, floats, average volumes, who's holding it, is it institutional, is it individual investors, institutional trades are recorded here. The earnings gives a breakdown of where their money is coming from, what are the earning estimates and how close are they hitting them. Consensus EPS estimates, yeah, there's quite a lot of information here. Students can go basically as deep or as shallow as they want. One of the more important ones is financial statements, though. So students can go back, income statements, balance sheets, cash flow statements, annually or quarterly, going back 5 years. And they can export all of this data as well. So if they want to save this and use it somewhere else, they can. Anything they've filed with the SEC is also available here. So they can find that for, again, finance classes use that most. Corporate actions, so splits, dividends, earnings events that all are mentioned there. Price history will give a historical prices for this stock going back to their IPO, so that students can go back as long as they want and they can download these and export it and use it however they like to. Analyst ratings. what are Wall Street analysts saying about this stock? Is it a buy? Is it a sell? Is it a hold? And again, this is one of the first places that students like to look before they're making trades, just to see, are they in consensus with everybody else on Wall Street, or are they going to be a contrarian? Under here, we also have ones called the advanced quotes. And in the advanced quotes, the reason why we still have this one here, it's actually an older version, but we have what's called a sector analysis tool, where students can get a breakdown of basically the entire stock market by sector. You just click on it, and they'll see the biggest peers in that sector. So who are the biggest banks? I see Fidelity, I see Standard, I see JP Morgan, I see Bank of America. Some of these are even English stocks, and some are American stocks, and they can kind of get a comparative chart on who's doing what and why. But yeah, there's a ton of stuff available in the quotes tool. For students in particular, the research tools video goes this in a lot more detail, because I'm kind of going through it pretty fast here. But that kind of breaks down a lot of the specific pages and how they would use them. So that's more or less it for students when it comes to them using it. For you as the teacher, we have a lot more stuff to look at too, though. So when you log into your teacher account, this is what you're going to see. This is called the admin dashboard. The admin dashboard is basically a summary of what's going on in your class. Up here I see my total registrations. I have one user in my class, which is me. There's one trade made, that was me. One forum post, and there's 89 days left until the trading period ends. This announcements thing, I can post an announcement to my class telling them to do one thing or another. You can also embed YouTube videos, you can put images in here, anything you like, if you do it in HTML. If not, you can just write a text message. Press save, and once I've made that announcement, for the students, it appears at the very top right of the screen here. So it's a pretty handy way to communicate with students, especially if you want to give them a homework over spring break or something where they might not necessarily be in class. The next one here is the forum posts. So you can see who's saying what on the forum at any time. Top traded securities. This is a graph showing you how many students are trading each of the 5 most popular securities in your class. It's a really good discussion point for the class, who's looking at what the most. Featured news. This comes from me. This is where I mention all of the new stuff that gets added to the site. I also usually send out an email, but I found that not many teachers read every email that gets sent out, so this is just kind of a reminder while you're in here about what's new. This is a snapshot of your class rankings, where you can see what's going on with all the top students in your class at any time pretty directly. And right here is a snapshot of your class's assignment progress. So you also have the ability to create a new assignment, see who's done what in your class. Basically, we try to give a lot of information at your fingertips. You also have a lot more reports available on the right side of the page here. So down here, I'll go to the summary report. This one gives me, this is that registration link for my class again. How many students have registered, how many have activated, how many trades have been placed in my class, what are the rules for my class trading. The next one's called the rank report, and this one's going to be empty right now, but the rank report is going to list the students in your class, what their ranking was. It's actually the ranking as of the end of day yesterday, and you can see their holdings and things again here. This one also lets you add or remove cash from any student's account. So if you want to give like a class participation bonus or something, you can do that here. Historical ranking will let you go back in time and see what the rankings were on any day of your class. The registration file report is going to list all of the students in your class. First name, last name, phone number will be empty. We only have that for the administrators. Username, email address. You can edit their username from here as well. So if your student's using a username that either isn't appropriate or they just want to change it, you can do that. You can also reset their password here as well. User accounts basically is more data. So how many orders have they placed? How many trades did they place? When's the last time they logged in? When's the last time they made a trade? That kind of thing. This is not the most popular report, but teachers usually do like looking at this once every couple of weeks. The reports report lets you export all of your students' data all at one time. So the account statements report, this will download basically every student's trading history, open positions, and account balances into one giant spreadsheet. So it's a really big download. It usually takes a while if you have more than 20 or 30 students. Top traded securities. This is basically the same thing as the one on the admin dashboard, but it's going to list a lot more securities. So it's going to basically list everything that's been traded in your class, and you can see who's doing what. This one's also different in that you can specify a date range, so you can just look at the last week, for example. And this last one, last but absolutely not least, is called Teams. Teams is something that's new this semester. And with a team, you can actually put your students into groups. So by putting your students into groups, it means that each student is still going to start with their own cache, and they're still going to start with their own assignment progress. However, there is now the ability to have a team portfolio. So every time they make a trade in their own portfolio, that also is applied to the team. It kind of groups them together, and then it gives team rankings and team portfolios where they can see what their entire team as a whole has been doing. So the team works really well because it still has that student accountability, where a student is responsible for their portfolio and they're responsible for their assignment progress, but they also have the team functionality where they're working in a group and they're trying to coordinate a strategy. So if you want to use Teams, you would come here to this page. The first thing would be add a new team. So team 1. It appears here. There's nobody in it yet. So I can take any of my students and add them to that team. So now the student's been added into that team, and it's all done. If teams are used, there's going to be another item on here called Teams on the main menu. And basically what this is going to do is, there's 2 pages here, team portfolio and team rankings. The team portfolio is going to show all of the holdings of the current team. So this is the one sprint stock that I have in my portfolio. It's also now in my team's portfolio. And the team rankings. The team rankings, it's empty now because it uses end of day rankings, but it's going to show what my team is doing compared to the other teams in the class. So I think that's all of it, and that was a lot. But that's all there is to it. So basically from this point forward, the next step is really to jump in and try to create a class, and you'll be coming back to me every time you have questions.
Right. So I don't have to use this strictly for the stock market. I could just do it for the other lessons.
Exactly.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
If you don't want to use a stock game at all, the system's still going to ask you to set up the class challenge. All you would do is you would set the trading start date to sometime in the distant future. That way students will never be able to actually start trading.
Okay. So, sounds good. Because I'm doing a unit on banking, and maybe I want to start with that so they become familiar with the program.
Sure.
Yeah.
So the only thing is that the students actually do quite like the stock game and the class rankings. Yeah. So it's nice to have, but you don't need to use it.
Right. I understand.
So any other questions right off the bat?
That's it. I'm good right now. Like I said, let me go dwell on it, and then if I have any questions, we'll definitely do the live chat.
Okay, sounds good. Just as a word of advice, most teachers, the first time they use it, they keep it pretty basic. They'll create a stock game that uses most of the default settings and the other stuff, and then as time goes on, they'll kind of get their feet wet on some of the other stuff that's available.
Yes, I agree.
All right, well then it was great speaking with you. I am going to post this recording to YouTube, and then I'm going to send it out shortly in case you want it for your records.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Yep, no problem. Have a good afternoon.
Bye-bye. You too.
Bye.
Bye.